Hey there, welcome to this week's episode of Next Level Play Therapy. Today I'm going to talk about what's the difference between sand tray therapy and sand play therapy, and why does that matter? So, if you're a play therapist and you've probably heard of sand tray therapy, maybe you've been kind of dabbling in it, or maybe you're well trained using it, or maybe you're just kind of curious about it. I think it's important to really understand the way in which you're referring to the work that you're doing because it makes a difference in people's understanding of what you're doing. For example, as a play therapist, referring to myself as a play therapist means that I've been trained in a theoretical model to help my clients access the therapeutic powers of play within the context of a strong therapeutic relationship. So that means I've been trained in a theoretical model to provide play therapy versus I use toys and games and maybe some art supplies to help my clients talk about what's going on in their lives, but I haven't been really trained in a theoretical model, and I'm not really understanding how those therapeutic powers of play work. So there's a big difference, especially nowadays here in the United States. I think play therapy is becoming more and more well known. And so when parents are seeking out therapy for their child, they have an idea of there is a thing called play therapy, and people are trained to do play therapy. So when referring to yourself as a play therapist, they have this idea of what that may include. So the same thing I believe is true when using the terms around what you're doing with the sandbox, the sand, and the miniatures. How you how you refer to what you're doing makes a big difference. And the example that I like to give a lot really is, so as a play therapist, I use art in play therapy. I am not an art therapist. I don't say that I'm doing art therapy because to be an art therapist, there's a training process that you go through. I don't say that I am a music therapist. I say that I use music. Sometimes not very well, but it's fun. I make a joyful noise. That's what I say. We use music in play therapy, but I don't do music therapy. I use drama, especially with the puppets, in play therapy, but I'm not a drama therapist. So there's a big difference in how we refer to what we're doing and what that means in terms of my training and experience and my clients' experience of the process. So that's why I thought it would be a good thing to talk about. I think there's a lot of confusion about this whole concept, really, even in the play therapy community. I've often heard play therapists say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do some art therapy." Well, if you're doing art therapy, then that means you have that training and background in art therapy versus I use art in therapy, in play therapy. And the way that I use art in play therapy is to help my clients access the therapeutic powers of play using a theoretical model within the context of a strong therapeutic relationship. So that's what I want to talk about today, which I've kind of already gotten into it a little bit. So what is sand tray therapy? And terminology is really key. So if you're watching today, I would love to know who's here. Post your name in the comments. Where are you from? What population are you working with? If you're watching on the replay, I would still love to know who's here, where are you from, who's watching. Any questions that you have, please feel free to post those in the comments. The only thing that I ask is not to post information in the comments about specific clients. This is a public format, so we just want to make sure that we keep it more general to protect privacy. So if you're using sand play therapy or sand tray therapy, post in the comments. I'd love to know what you're doing. And if you find the information useful, please feel free to pass this information along, share it on your social media platforms, like it. And if you're listening to the podcast episode, I would love it if you would leave a review. Always helps to get the feedback about what's helpful so I can keep doing more of that. So, and I'm actually so at the end, I'll share some information about a training. If you're interested, I'm actually a really firm believer that the best way to learn how to use sand tray therapy and play therapy is to get your hands in the sand. You can see all my miniatures behind me. I have quite the collection. These miniatures are going to be moving next month. I've gotten a training space so that I can do more in-person sand tray trainings, which will be in southern Utah, St. George, Utah. If you've never been there, it's awesome. It's very beautiful. It's hot in the summertime, and outside of the summertime, it's really beautiful. It's beautiful in the summer. It's just super hot in the summer. Anyways, so terminology is key, really, to help people understand what type of service you're providing when you say that you're using the sandbox, the sand, and miniatures. As a play therapist, we are providing that free and protected space to help our clients access those therapeutic powers of play for healing. And we do that using a theoretical model within the context of a strong therapeutic relationship. And so it's not just about pulling out toys and games. As a play therapist, there are specific things that we're doing. There's a theoretical model that we're using, and we're doing that to help children access the therapeutic powers of play. The therapeutic powers of play, I believe, are what set play therapy apart from other expressive arts modalities. As play therapists, we understand that the play is the language. Just like adults use talking in their therapy sessions, that talking process using a theoretical model within the context of strong therapeutic relationship, that talking process is what helps clients, usually adult clients, move through that healing process. So play is the language. Play is the vehicle in which children heal. It's not just about using art supplies and games to get them to talk to you about what's going on in their lives. Using more of an adult model, it's understanding developmentally children use play for healing. And that's one of the fundamental differences of play therapy from other expressive arts modalities like art therapy and music therapy and drama therapy and poetry therapy. Play therapy accesses the therapeutic powers of play. So when you're talking about sand tray versus sand play, you're talking about for sand tray therapy, that has more to do with a play therapist. That's what we're doing, using the sand tray, the sand, and the miniatures. Using a play therapy theoretical model is sand tray therapy. Sand play therapy is based on the work of Dora Koff using a Jungian psychoanalytical model to facilitate that healing process. And so if you're talking about using sand play, then you're talking about more of that model that was developed by Dora Koff based on the work of Margaret Lowenfeld. So Dorokoff, a little nerdy history here. So, originally, Margaret Lowenfeld is the one that created this technique to work with children using a sandbox sand and these little miniatures, figurines. And then she used more of a Freudian psychoanalytical model. And Dorokoff was working with Carl Jung at the time, and she had heard about what Margaret Lowenfeld was doing, and then went over there and got trained using Jungian psychoanalytic theory. And so that's really the roots of sand play. Just like we say, if you're a child-centered play therapist, we say our work is grounded in the work of Virginia Axline, who trained with Carl Rogers and used that client-centered approach and created a model for children called child-centered play therapy. And so it's kind of, if you say you're a child-centered play therapist, then that's what you're referring to, that specific model using child-centered play therapy. If you say that you're using sand play therapy, then you're referring to being trained in the model developed by Dora Koff. And so sand tray therapy is going to refer to using the sand tray, the miniatures, and based on a theoretical model, a play therapy theoretical model. And so when you're using sand tray therapy within play therapy, what you're saying is you're using sand tray based on a theoretical model. For example, so my foundational training is child-centered play therapy. And when I have a client and my client is using the sand tray, the miniatures, and the sand, and I'm using child-centered play therapy with that client, then it's going to look much different than somebody who's an Adlerian play therapist, and the way they use the sandbox, the sand, and the miniatures is going to be based on using that Adlerian play therapy model. And this is this is a lot of why it's important to get really good training, because when you're getting training for using the sandbox, the sand, and the miniatures, your training really is rooted in a theoretical model. And if we're play therapists and we want to use more of a play therapy model, then it's most likely going to be getting training on maybe Gestalt play therapy and Gestalt play therapy specifically with sand tray, or Adlerian play therapy specifically with the sand tray. Now, a lot of people, myself included, use more of an integrated model. The way that I was trained to use the miniatures is really more of a Jungian, except for child-centered. The way that I was trained to use the sand tray process is really more of that Jungian informed, because the people that I got the training from all had their roots that way. And even then, integrating theoretical models. So a lot of times when I'm doing specifically sand tray training, like I have a training coming up, it's called Sand Tray in Play Therapy with Children and Adolescents. So it's not child-centered play therapy, sand tray training. It's It's Santre in play therapy with children and adolescents. And in this one, I kind of go over a lot of what the difference is. And I specifically say the model that I'm going to show you is rooted in these theoretical models, which is going to determine how we're doing the training today. And then we get in. I think the best way to learn to use the Santre process is getting your hands in the sand, using these miniatures behind you, or doing some training with somebody else who's got miniatures, getting your hands in the sand, having a sandbox, and then you really get to experience the power of the Santre therapy process. And I've been doing that the trainings, the Santre trainings, sheesh, for at least 10 years now. Probably trying to remember when I started. I probably about 10 years. And guaranteed, this is, to me, this is why I love doing the in-person ones and getting your hands in the sand, because everything I just said becomes more real. And you really understand the power of this process and what it kind of stirs up inside, which means you're going to hold that Santre making process more effectively with your clients. And all of these things that I've been talking about today make more sense. And so and how do you hold that Santre? How do you process that with clients? It's going to be based on a specific model or an integrated approach for these models, and then you're understanding. So that would be more of a prescriptive play therapy approach. How are we integrating these specific theories to make them more coherent and therapeutic, especially when you're talking about something that's a projective modality, like expressive arts are a projective modality. We want to make sure that we're holding that unconscious content for our clients in a really safe and protected way. And guarantee when I do these trainings, somebody is one, there's usually somebody crying. And when I did Santre trainings way back early on, I got to the point where I just didn't even wear makeup when I went, because I knew I was going to be doing some crying, which was good. I kind of process some things myself while also learning. But here to me is why it's important to understand that. And this is why they say that. Not that I want people to come and cry at my trainings. It's not that at all. It's really about, if you don't take anything away other than you get how powerful this modality is, then to me, that's good. Because then you're going to be, the way in which you approach it is going to be more intentional. And you're going to be more effective creating that free and protected space. And so to me, that's one of the reasons I love doing the in person. I keep them really small because we do a lot of Santre making, Santre processing, and talking about Santres so that you understand what model you're using and how that helps your clients access those therapeutic powers of play for healing. And I think that's a really important part of the process. So that is it for today. This one's kind of a short one, kind of getting down to some of the specifics. Let me do a recap, just kind of a review. Terminology. What is Santre therapy? Terminology is key. Santre, the way in which you, the words in which you use to describe what you're doing or explain what you're doing have meaning, because it helps people understand what modality you're using. And so that's really a foundational principle to understand for play therapists, is that this means that you're really being intentional about the way in which you're describing the work that you're doing so that you're communicating more effectively the work that you're doing. And I would say this is really true now, especially here in the United States anyway. Parents have a much greater understanding. Different collateral professionals like pediatricians, school counselors, school personnel. I think there's much more of an awareness of what play therapy is. And so one of the things that we want to do is be really clear communicators on the type of services we're providing. And that means the terminology that we're using to explain what we're doing. For example, do you use art in play therapy, or are you a trained art therapist? Do you use music in play therapy, or you're a trained music therapist? Do you use sand tray in play therapy, or do you use sand play? And so that really, one, I think it helps to keep us clear on what we're doing, but also helps to really help others understand what we're doing and the play therapy experience that we're providing for our young clients. And so the next thing is, in play therapy, we're using the sand tray process to help children access those therapeutic powers of play. And so that's one of the fundamental differences, is helping children access the therapeutic powers of play using a theoretical model, because your theory drives your application. So your theory model is going to influence how your clients are accessing those therapeutic powers of play within the context of a really strong therapeutic relationship. And so that means, am I using child-centered play therapy when I'm using the sand tray? Am I using Adlerian play therapy when I'm using the sand tray? Am I using Gestalt play therapy, or Jungian play therapy, or CBT play therapy, or prescriptive play therapy? What theoretical model am I using to help my clients access the therapeutic powers of play using the sand tray, the sand, and the miniatures? And then the final thing is really your approach to sand tray is really going to be based on your theoretical model, which is kind of what I just went through. And that really explains to others. One, it helps you, guide you through the play therapy process, helps you understand how exactly are you using these tools, the tools being the sandbox, the sand, and the miniature. These are tools like any other tool in the play therapy room, in your playroom. And your model is going to influence how you're facilitating that change process using these tools to access the therapeutic powers of play, and how you're going to make sense of where they are in each stage of the change process. So all of those different models have specific stages of the play therapy process, and how are you going to make sense of what's going on in the sand tray to help you understand where they are in the change process. And that's why getting good training and getting good consultation is really, really important to help you ground the work that you're doing in a model that's going to help your clients experience that healing that you are hoping for them to experience. So that is it for today. So I want to, I'm just changing my banner here. If you're interested in the training that I have coming up, it's called Sand Tray in Play Therapy. I'm going to change my little, well, I'll have to fix that later. I was going to put my little banner up. So it's called Sand Tray in Play Therapy with Children and Adolescents. And it's an in person training in St. George, Utah. And it's going to be in July. So, middle of July. So, that'll give you time to make arrangements if you need to. So we'll post some links in the comments in case you're interested in more. But it's a 2-day sand tray training using the sand tray miniatures, really teaching you some foundational kind of principles for using sand tray and play therapy. I like to get really practical. How do you process? Like, what do you say? What do you not say? What do you do? What do you not do? What are these? Like, why do you stand them up like I do in my miniature collection? Why are they standing up versus being in little bins? What's the practical way to do it? But also, what do you look for in the sand tray? How do you make sense of what they're doing? How are you identifying those themes? And then how are you holding those themes and that information through all the different stages of the change process? And what are some of the typical things that you can see that happen in the play therapy process using sand tray with children? What does that actually look like? So we'll do lots and lots of sand tray making, lots and lots of processing sand trays, making sense of them. How do you safely therapeutically hold those to create that free and protected space? If you're interested in the sand tray training, it's coming up in July. Pop over to my website, which is rhplaytherapytraining.com. Go to the courses page. Look for sand tray and play therapy with children and adolescents. Again, the website is Renewing Hearts Play Therapy Training. Go to the courses page. All righty. And I will see you next time. Bye for now.